Have you ever heard the phrase, "Don't scare me with the dead person's mat"? If you live in Mexico, you probably have, but if you live abroad, you might not have. In Mexico, there are many popular sayings that sometimes remain relevant and sometimes, depending on the era, fall into disuse. There are sets of words or phrases that, when combined, might not seem to have any meaning, but they actually do. And of course, if there's one thing that distinguishes us in Mexico, it's double entendre. But what does it mean to scare with a dead person's mat? A very simple definition tells us that this phrase is used when someone wants to cause fear with false or exaggerated information, when there is no real alarm, danger, or reason to be frightened. Therefore, more than causing fear in the person saying the phrase, it is used in a mocking tone in the face of the supposed danger. And of course, you know that on this channel we provide more information than they do elsewhere. So, let's look at some pre-Hispanic background and the possible origin of this phrase. For those who don't know what a petate is, it's an object that comes in various sizes and shapes. In simple terms, we can refer to it as a type of woven mat or rug. It is made from the fibers of the palm plant, which has been used to make these types of objects since pre-Hispanic times. But what does a petate have to do with a dead person and or popular phrase? To understand this, we must grasp the pre-Hispanic worldview, where such a simple object had many symbolic meanings. Because a petate is like life, an interweaving of things coming together where we are just one thread, which, when joined with the rest of the universe, forms the petate. And well, here it's worth mentioning another object that, for many people today, might seem insignificant. I'm referring to the so-called jícaras. This object is a kind of wort split in half. It is taken from a tree as a fruit, which undergoes a process resulting in these cup-like containers. They had many uses, including, obviously, for drinking liquids. In Nahuatl, they were called xicali, and the Spanish understood the word as jicali, which later evolved into the current jícara. Well, jícara and petate were closely related in terms of special aspects. Why? Because another symbolism of the petate was that it represented the earth, the place where we step, where humans live. And if in the petate we have the earth, the jícara represents duality, since when turned upside down, it symbolizes the sky. In fact, a better name that the so-called Aztec calendar should receive is Huauxicalli, or celestial jícara. So, we have the duality of earth and sky in such simple objects as the petate and the jícara. Now, what did the petate have to do with the dead? It had many uses. To name just a few, it served as beds back then, although they were nothing like the beds we use today. They were also used for sleeping, for eating on them, for having sexual relations, and for placing babies on them. And of course, they were the surrounds in which some pre-Hispanic cultures graved their dead. And examples of these practices survive in codices, as we can see here. If the symbolism that the petate represents the earth is correct, then the earth, like a petate, embraces the dead once more. It protects them and prepares them to the buried, like a seed that will give life as it decomposes. Of course, not all the cultures had the custom of wrapping their dead in petates. But in several groups it was a common practice. This practice continued for some time. Obviously, with the arrival of Christianity, the coffins we know today became common. However, burials were varied and depended on each individual's means. One could be buried in a coffin or in a simple petate. Certainly the price of a petate does not compare at all to that of a coffin. So, this burial style survived for hundreds of years, even into the period of the Mexican Revolution. During this time, given the high number of casualties in battles and the lack of resources, some of the dead continue to be buried following the pre-Hispanic tradition, as we can see in this photograph. Unfortunately, even today, this method is sometimes used by criminals to dispose of bodies. And of course, we also see it in the offerings of the Day of the Dead on November 1st and 2nd in many parts of the country. So yes, the connection between the petate and the dead is now clear. And this association gave rise to many popular phrases. For example, someone being petateado, which is another way to saying that someone died. Now, that we've explained these historical precedents that illustrate the relationship between the petate and the dead, let's discuss the most probably origin of the phrase at the center of this video. The most likely version places it in the colonial period in what is now the city of Guadalajara. Around the middle of the 16th century, a group of residents in the city decided to form a brotherhood. A brotherhood is a recognized association by the Catholic Church created for religious purposes, and they also established a hospital called the Hospital of Veracruz. One of the main duties of the Brethren of the Holy Veracruz was to attend to the condemned who were sentenced to death. When a criminal was sentenced to death, they were handed over to the Brotherhood, who comforted them with consoling words before execution. The Brethren covered all the expenses associated with the burial of the condemned, including the sorrow and the coffin. According to the narratives, they spent hundreds of years providing this kind of assistance to executed criminals. However, over time, the coffins and sarons became increasingly modest. This was because the Knights of the Holy Cross, as they were known, had fewer and fewer resources to carry out their works. By the 18th century, they could no longer provide coffins for the bodies of the criminals, only simply petates, for their burial. The deceased were grafted in these petates, and then they were carried in a procession from the hospital to the burial site. As there is never a sorting of jesters or pranksters in Mexico, it is said that they were those who made fun of the petate covering the dead. So, they began to refer to the members of the Holy Cross Brotherhood as Caballeros del Petate, or Knights of the Mat. As a result, when they saw the procession carrying the petate, as a charm, people would exclaim, "Don't scare me with the dead person's mat." It is said that this phrase was mainly used by criminals and thieves who, precisely because of their crimes, could one day be apprehended, executed and buried in this manner. Others say that brave individuals, upon seeing the procession, would say, "They don't scare me even with the dead person's mat." All of these expressions minimized the gravity of the executed person's death and turned the event into a mockery. The use of this phrase continued and spread throughout New Spain until the Mexican War of Independence. The Caballeros del Petate changed their name to Citizens of the Holy Veracruz. However, the phrase persisted and continues to be used to this day. Therefore, today it is still in use as a way to express that something supposedly serious or harmful is not actually that bad. As you can see, A blend of pre-Hispanic customs and traditions with new events led to the creation of popular phrases and sayings. So, if someone tries to scare you with the dead person's mat, don't worry, it's not such a big deal.